name's Joe, and the speaker today is going to be Omar, and Omar is going to be talking on disaster socialism, the shock doctrine, and post-earthquake in Christchurch. How our rulers can use disasters and calamities to radically restructure the system. So we're seeing already an attack on students. They want to raise interest. They want to attack beneficiaries, and even the people who are paying council rents in Christchurch are now being infested with evictions. So Omar's going to talk about that. Before we begin, just give you a little bit of introduction to Socialist Aotearoa. We were formed about 2 or 3 years ago. We're an active socialist group, both on and off campus. We support workers' rights. We build trade unions where we're active as organisers, members and delegates. So this week we've been down supporting Sky City workers who were locked out and manning the picket lines there. Some of them were pretty strong. Last week we were supporting call centre workers in the South Great Road. So that's the kind of group we are. We're active. Not only in national issues to do with workers' rights, but also international issues as well. Recently we were active in the movement to support the revolutions in Egypt, Tunisia, and we have been very active for Palestine for many years. So if you're interested in being part of an active group that learns some theory but puts it into practice, then we're the group for you. And without further ado, I'll present you to Omar Hamed.
Thank you very much, Joe. Look, folks, it's a very grim topic that brings us together. You know, there's still pulling bodies out of the ruins of Christchurch, but I think that in the aftermath of this disaster, there is a politics to it, as well as the deep human tragedy. And the politics are twofold. And the important politics is that on one hand we have disaster socialism. On one hand we have people organising and getting out there and showing solidarity on a grassroots level. And on the other hand, we have the vultures circling around the city. We have the IMF, we have John Key, we have the big corporations coming in, and they're looking for money. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about disaster socialism first. I'm going to lead into a bit of a discussion about the shock doctrine, and then we're going to open it up for a bit of a forum. The amazing response by the people of Christchurch to start cooperatively organising the rescue efforts, food and water provisions, and the pooling of community resources, even in the absence of law and order, has been amazing. One community collective, Beyond Resistance, in the very poor working class Christchurch East suburbs, has been using cars, bikes, or on foot, taking food and water out to those in need. They've been going through with bottled water, soup, vegetables and gas canisters for cooking, and those have been the main items of need. What they've found is that when a terrible natural disaster happens, people work together collectively and cooperatively without distinction of class or hierarchy. In one suburb, Addington, the Addington Action Committee, a residence-based group, has sprung up in response to the crisis. They formed a community centre to help the vulnerable people in the Addington neighbourhood, the Salvation Army addicts who are at the Salvation Army Support Centre, the elderly residents and the young families. And what they've been doing is providing food, water and information to their community. Around New Zealand, people have been offering homes for those left homeless. Fijian tourist resorts have been offering free holidays, and tens of thousands of Red Cross volunteers and fundraisers have been working hard around the country to support the people affected. As one of the members of the Beyond Resistance Collective said, innumerable deeds of mutual aid have taken place among neighbours. Spontaneous soup kitchens and distribution centres have sprung up throughout the city, while surrounding towns amassed aid and support for the people left homeless. Communities have grown through the crisis, neighbourhoods have taken control of their situations, neighbours have become friends, and the momentum continues. There is a palpable sense of anger and outrage that the government has left the community to themselves, and there is a sense amongst the activists and organisers that nothing like this should ever be allowed to happen again. The problem has been that the economy and the way the economy has been organised in Christchurch has, as John Minto said, always been at odds with our natural instincts. We have been sold the idea that our life choices arise from our role as consumers in the marketplace rather than from those of the interconnected and codependent citizens. It's a bad fit because at heart we deeply respect the lives of our fellow human beings. And we've seen this in the Christchurch quake, where supermarkets have been full, where the pantries of people around living in the suburbs have been empty. We've seen this where the power companies go to the wealthy neighbourhoods, the rich neighbourhoods, and leave the working class communities for weeks and weeks. We've seen it with the way the portaloos are being distributed around the city, is that the way the council is distributing it is whoever calls their 0800 number first and most often. And of course what the case is that if you've got your power up and you've got your phone lines up, which happens in the wealthy areas first, those are the areas that get the portaloos. What we've also seen in the aftermath of this disaster is that the ideology that capitalism is based on, the ideology that human society is naturally competitive, self-interested, and driven by material reward is not true. What the aftermath of the Christchurch earthquake shows, and we've seen it on our TV screens again and again, is the absolute opposite. Humans are naturally cooperative, prepared to make incredible sacrifices, and brave terrible dangers for complete strangers, and will work incredibly hard and make generous contributions for no material reward except to help other people. And this is the distinction between socialism and capitalism. Whereas the capitalist economy has been so slow to respond to the crisis and so slow to provide for human needs on the ground in Christchurch, when people have gone out and organised themselves, they've been able to provide their own resources, whether it's the soup kitchens of East Christchurch or the care centre of Wellington. Socialism is the belief that the economy should be democratically controlled and owned by workers. We shouldn't have humanity divided into two rival classes, the shareholding capitalist class who live in mansions, own private jets, and holiday in Europe each year, and for whom the quake is a brief interruption, and the working class who are being forced by the Christchurch City Council to pay full rent on their council flats, even when they have no power, no sewage, no running water, who have lost jobs and incomes and will have to move to another city, who are always last to get the portaloos, and who in 6 months' time will no doubt be lectured by some smarmy working group on why they should go get a job, get off a benefit, and why their public services are going to be cut. The struggle between this working class and the shareholding class is taking the form right now of wage cuts, of cuts to public services like early childhood education, of the raise in GST while the rich get massive tax cuts, of mass unemployment, of welfare reform, of the transfer of wealth from the public sector to the private sector through privatisation and the bailout of finance companies. The class struggle will go on until either workers consent to be absolute slaves, or until the working class overthrows the capitalist class in a socialist revolution and gets rid of all classes and all property. And I'm sure you all agree with that because you're all here. Now, real socialism is based on a couple of principles, right? That wealth, that the world's wealth should be used to fight homelessness and hunger and not used for the interests of a tiny enriched minority, and that instead of fighting wars to promote the power of the multinational corporate class, the working majority should be cooperating to create a world of plenty. Now, a disaster is not a revolution, but it can reveal, in a flash that seems gone the moment it arrives, the capacity we human beings have to reorder our lives in a new cooperative way, leaving behind the degradation, the oppression, the violence and corruption that is our daily fare under capitalism. And that has been the most important thing that we've learned from Christchurch, is that people, when the government takes a step back, when the corporations start running, will naturally start to work in a cooperative and socialist manner. And this is disaster socialism. But there's a flip side to this coin. And the flip side is that the crisis is being used by the elites to push through a new set of social and economic reforms.